It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the soaring demand for help from victims of revenge porn. We'll have an exclusive report on the team working to remove images and videos from the internet and working to change the law. Tonight, I'll speak to reality TV star Georgia Harrison, who waived her right to anonymity to help bring about change.
I couldn't sleep at night without knowing I was taking some form of action to help these women.
Also coming up, a new strain of swine flu found in a human in the UK for the first time. We'll find out if it's cause for alarm. I'll be speaking to MP Clive Lewis and journalist Laura Trevelyan about their journey to discover their shared family history on either side of the slave trade. And move over John Lewis, the Christmas advert made by a pub in Northern Ireland for £700 has taken social media by storm. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. But we start with breaking news from the Middle East. And in the past few minutes, Israel has said that according to the Red Cross, 11 hostages are currently on their way to Israeli territory. It's the fourth day of the truce, which has now been extended for another 2 days. Palestinian prisoners held by Israel, including dozens of children, are also due to be released this evening. Let's get the latest from our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who joins me now from Jerusalem. And it is very much a waiting game at this stage of the day, Alistair. But we do know that the latest number of hostages are on their way to Israel tonight.
Yeah, so it sounds as though things are running pretty smoothly, as they have in previous nights. It's always slightly different times as to when the hostages are handed over to the International Red Cross, but the Israeli Defense Forces have said that they have the information that the 11 Israelis due to be handed over tonight are now in the care of the Red Cross. We understand from Middle East sources that they are a mixture of French, German and Argentinian dual nationals, so dual Israeli nationals who are being handed over. But beyond that, we don't have any further information as to their identities. In exchange, 31 Palestinian prisoners will be released from Israeli jails later this evening. That normally happens a couple of hours after the hostage release has taken place. Now, today was supposed to be the last day of this 4-day truce, but late this evening it was confirmed that that has been extended by a further 2 days. And over these next 2 days, all being well, another 20 hostages will be released, and in return, Israel will release Palestinian prisoners as well. So I think that shows to us that the mediation channels are working, that the Qatari, Egyptian and US negotiations are having some effect. Israel, of course, is very keen to get as many hostages out as possible. Hamas is willing to have the ceasefire extended because it allows them time to regroup. It allows more humanitarian aid to get into the Gaza Strip. But also they are taking a lot of credit in the West Bank, which is traditionally a Fatah area, not Hamas. They're taking a lot of credit, though, for the Palestinian prisoners who are being released. So there's a lot to be gained here from Hamas. Israel, for its part, of course, wants to get all the hostages released, but at the same time has to balance that against its desire to resume the military operations in Gaza. So a further 2-day extension to this truce, assuming that it holds. Hope that it could be extended further still, but I have to be honest, I can't see how it turns into something much more longer term or even permanent as things stand at the moment.
Alistair, thank you. Alistair Bunkle with the latest from Jerusalem. As soon as there are any further developments, we will head live back to Israel. And now, next tonight, a special report for you from the front line of the fight against image-based sexual abuse, otherwise known as revenge porn. Sky News has been given exclusive access to the Revenge Porn Helpline. Based in Devon, the service has helped thousands of people who've fallen victim to so-called sextortion scams, blackmail, or simply a former partner trying to cause them distress. Calls to this helpline have jumped by more than 30% this year. Our West of England correspondent Dan Whitehead has been to meet the team there, as well as some of those that they've been helping.
Hi, Revenge Porn Helpline, Emma speaking.
For the first time, cameras have been allowed inside the Revenge Porn Helpline.
I think from what you've described, you've been a victim of a very common type of online crime known as sextortion.
In an office in South Devon, a small group of women are at the forefront of tackling intimate image abuse. They've removed more than 300,000 videos and photos from adult sites and social networks since the helpline was started 8 years ago.
Usually people that call us are very, very upset. They are very anxious if their content has already been shared or they think that they're in danger of it being shared imminently. That's an extremely distressing thing.
Intimate image abuse crime is on the rise. It involves sexual content being uploaded to the internet, often by ex-partners or scammers, without the person's consent. The team here were often the first people terrified victims turn to.
A typical phrase would be like, I shouldn't have sent them the content, I shouldn't have done that, it's my fault, I should have known better. And I get quite passionate personally, and I think the rest of the helpline team do, about kind of reminding them that it isn't their fault.
Exclusive figures for Sky News show that in the first 9 months of this year, the Revenge Porn Helpline received more than 3,250 phone calls. That's an increase of 31% on the same period last year. If you include online reports to the helpline, there have been more than 10,000 people contacting them. That's already 13% higher than last year's total. For victims, it can be devastating. Bryony's ex-partner filmed her in the shower before threatening to share the videos.
I screamed. I was terrified. I jumped out as quick as I could. I got ready as quick as I could, and I was frantically asking him to please delete it. My body is my own body. It wasn't his choice to decide who else sees it.
The helpline, funded by the Home Office, is known as a trusted flagger by social networks. And for significant cases, they can pick up the phone to raise the alarm. Some victims end up with thousands of images online, while others pay ransoms.
I've supported a client in the past who paid £30,000. I think that's the most I've ever seen working at the helpline. £30,000.
Deep fakes and AI are creating another strand of this digital weapon. It makes the Revenge Porn Helpline even more vital for the growing number of victims. Dan Whitehead, Sky News.
Georgia Harrison, who was mentioned in Dan's report, is a reality TV star who became a leading campaigner on image-based sexual abuse after a video of her was posted online. Well, the man responsible went to prison earlier this year and was put on the sex offenders register, with Georgia waiving her right to anonymity to now help others in the same situation. I began by asking Georgia how she got involved with a campaign to change the law to make it easier to charge and convict offenders.
The online safety bill was already coming about, but there was nothing to cover the image-based sexual abuse law or any change to it anyway, until my case became so big and so widely spoken about. And basically, at the time, there was a clause within the law which said the only way to convict someone was to prove that they intended to cause you distress, you know. So it's really hard to prove that someone intended to harm you when they uploaded that footage. And, you know, you shouldn't have to prove what their intention was. If you're going to film someone in a sexual act or you're going to share sexually explicit content without consent, that is just wrong, full stop. And it doesn't matter what your intentions are. So I was really shocked by that, and I knew it was meaning a lot of victims, one, didn't come forward, or two, didn't have a successful conviction when they did. So yeah, I started speaking to local MPs and seeing what was the best way to evoke change. And they said, you know, the online safety bill is going ahead in about 6 to 9 months. I think there's still a chance to make an amendment. And luckily, it was just the perfect timing to get that added to the online safety bill and make it an official law.
So just to remind people who perhaps aren't aware of your case, the man involved here was a man called Stephen Bear. He was sentenced to 21 months behind bars, also ordered to sign the sex offenders register, and given a restraining order not to contact you for 5 years. Now, for many people, their journey there would come to an end. You've got justice, you want to get on with your life. But such was the public nature of your court case, because you were both in the public eye through being on television, that people started to come forward to you to talk about their experiences. What did they say to you? What made you start campaigning for other people and to take this on board? Because I think possibly until your case came into the public eye, the term revenge porn wasn't really that well known. In fact, if this happened to somebody, they wouldn't be able to name what was happening to them. It wasn't seen as something you could go to the police with.
Yeah, I think what made me have to make a difference and sort of continue on with campaigning around image-based sexual abuse is just the sheer overwhelming amount of people reaching out to me. Like, I just suddenly became this person that anyone going through it, I was their first port of call. And there were so many messages, like, honestly, just an overwhelming amount. And like, most of them felt let down by the justice system. Most of them didn't know what to do. A lot of them never wanted to tell anyone else about the incident. But it was like people were crying out for help, and I'm having to read this every single day. And it's like I couldn't sleep at night without knowing I was taking some form of action to help these women, especially when I can relate so much to feeling so lost. But I think most importantly, unheard. Like, when this happens to you, you feel like these big tech platforms and everyone else involved just doesn't care about you, and you're just like crying in the darkness and there's no one listening.
Because what's the next step now? Because you've had that change in the law, but also it's about where that video goes, because what people may not be aware of watching this interview is that once you've won your court case, that is great. But those images, those videos are still on platforms out there on the internet, and it's really difficult to get them down.
Yeah. So when I'm speaking to the helpline, I'm like, you know, guys, I'm getting a lot of opportunities to use my voice for change here. What is the main other issue?
Yeah, what do you need?
Yeah, like, what else can we do to help? And they said, if you are to successfully convict someone of image-based sexual abuse, your footage still doesn't become illegal. So it can technically go on any platform, and they can't hold the platform accountable because it isn't illegal content. You know, it's illegal to upload it as an individual, but it's not illegal to host it as a platform. So I'm really hoping there's a way that we can change that. And it's very simple, that if you go through a very strenuous court case and you win, you then have the right to say to these platforms, you have to take that down, or there is going to be some form of a consequence. And they're saying that they're really, really struggling to get footage taken down because of this situation. And, you know, my video is still out there, and I have the same issues because of it, and it's just not right.
Can we talk about the impact on you? Because, you know, this is happening to women, and it's happening to girls. You know, young people have phones at 12, 13 now, and often don't realise the power of them for so many reasons. But just explain to people watching what the impact is, because it's such an important message. What may seem like a joke or just a 5-minute head of steam to post a video or a photo online of a friend or something like that. Just explain the real impact it has on a life, on your life.
It's devastating, and I especially think, like, if you were younger and your mind's still developing and you're still a teenager, it can change the entire rest of your life. And I always say, like, people send it round like it's some sort of meme, but, you know, it isn't a meme. Like,
real people,
it is a ghost of your innocence, and, like, it is a part of your dignity and your soul that you will never, ever get back. And for the sake of, like, 2 seconds of looking at something or having a laugh or sharing it with your friends, you could change someone's life forever, and they may never look at themselves the same, especially if you're still developing at a young age. So, you know, firstly, if you're going to take a picture or something like that, you should really consider, how would I feel if this got shared around my school? How would I feel if a lot of people saw this before you send it? And if you're ever going to consider sharing something like that, you should think, you know, what impact do I want to have on someone's life? Do I want to ruin someone's life? Because that is what I could potentially do, and most probably will do, if I share this with even one person. Because if you've had the ability to share it, that other person will, and before you know it, you can't get it back. And then you're going to ruin your own life too, because you'll have to live with regret.
Georgia, we need to get you on a schools tour. Talk to young people about this.
I think education's the key to change.
Yeah, definitely. Georgia, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us in the UK tonight. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Georgia Harrison there. Well, our correspondent Dan Whitehead is with me now in the studio. And Dan, you saw his report a short time ago at the Revenge Porn Helpline. And just talking about the rise in numbers, 30% just this year, Dan. Talk to me about the scale of the problem. And I was talking to Georgia there about, you know, she effectively helped change the law, which in essence is hopefully going to make it easier to take perpetrators to court and get convictions. What's the reality of that situation right now?
Well, currently at the minute, like many offences against women and girls, the conviction rates are incredibly low. The domestic abuse charity Refuge did some research back in January. It's around about 4% of cases over a 3-year period since this was made a crime of intimate image abuse actually resulted in a conviction. The Crown Prosecution Service has told us actually the number of people charged and going to court is up 200% since it became a crime. But that number last year was only 600 cases. It's the absolute tip of the iceberg, and actually behind the scenes here, like many crimes against women and girls, the vast majority go unreported, and they're often dropped even if people do go to the police.
Yeah, because as Georgia was saying there, for so many people, she was really brave, but it's the shame and the stigma about, going to the police with something like that. But this problem isn't going away. In fact, there are signs it's only going to get worse, because you touched on it in your report there. The future of tech, we're talking about deep fakes, AI playing a role in image-based sexual abuse.
I think what's really interesting, having spent time in that helpline, is a lot of people might watch this and go, well, just don't film, don't do this, take a photograph. That ship has sailed, and it's absolutely how a whole young generation build relationships. And actually, the helpline are quite keen to stress, look, that's absolutely fine. That's not the problem. It's how we deal with the people who are breaking the law. But you're right. It is not just about disgruntled ex-partners or scam artists carrying out sextortion scams. Now someone can create a deep fake from simply a Facebook profile picture. They don't have to have had that relationship with that person. If they've got a vendetta against them, it's now much easier, and that is a growing problem. And Sophie, the manager of the helpline, told me at the time that that's the wave that is potentially coming here. That AI and deep fake, which can be created so quickly and so easily, opens a whole new area to the problem.
OK, Dan, thank you. Dan Whitehead there on the fight against revenge porn, otherwise known as image-based sexual abuse. Thank you, Dan. Now, the UK's first human case of a new strain of swine flu has been detected in North Yorkshire. It's not known how this individual contracted the virus, but they only experienced, we are told, mild symptoms and have now recovered. The UK Health Security Agency is following up with contacts of the person who was infected. With more, here's our science correspondent, Thomas Moore.
Every time a virus jumps from animals into humans, there is a shudder of alarm. This time, it's over a strain of flu called H1N2, and it seems to have originated in pigs. The human case was detected through routine screening in North Yorkshire. The individual only had mild symptoms, and they made a full recovery. But how they came to be infected is a mystery. The strain is similar to a virus circulating in pigs in the UK, yet the individual doesn't work with the animals, and the UK Health Security Agency is now scrambling to trace contacts to establish whether the virus is spreading below the radar.
There may have been some limited transmission between people, but that is different from a situation of more widespread transmission among people. As part of our investigations, we are increasing our surveillance efforts just to understand exactly if there has been any transmission.
In 2009, there was a pandemic of swine flu caused by another virus called H1N1. The infection was relatively mild, though still caused 457 deaths in the UK. But there are flu strains in other animals that scientists are on high alert for. Top of the list at the moment is H5N1, or bird flu. That's caused 878 cases worldwide since 2003, and more than half have died. A nasty virus with significant pandemic potential. There's no evidence that the Yorkshire strain of swine flu is in the same league. Animal viruses have to adapt to human cells before they can spread easily between people. But UK authorities have notified the World Health Organization, and scientists will be trying to understand just how much a risk there is from this new virus.
OK, so just how worrying is this? Let's bring in Dr Simon Clark, microbiologist at the University of Reading. Good to see you.
Good evening.
Let's row back, remind people essentially what swine flu is.
Well, swine flu is really just a version of flu that circulates in pigs. Flu can circulate in different animals, pigs being one of them, and it's not unusual for it. It doesn't happen that often, but it's not unheard of for it to jump from pigs to human beings. And occasionally you get a version that can then spread further within the human population.
What do we know about this new strain? Because that's the one that we understand the the human has contracted in North Yorkshire?
So humans have contracted H5N1 before, but this version seems to be a little bit different. I don't think we have a good handle yet on exactly what that difference means, but I think we do know that we'll find out in due course. And really the big question is whether it spreads between people.
Yeah, what we do know about this case is, you know, there's very little information at the moment, but we do know that the person who contracted it wasn't in direct contact with the animal, which, you know, is pause for thought when the common thinking, as you're saying, is you have to come into direct contact with them.
Yeah, you're right, it is pause for thought. They may not come into direct contact regularly, but could they have had a brief glancing encounter, if you like, with a
petting
farm?
zoo or something, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So that's interesting to see how many steps in terms of people there are between the person who's got this virus and animals and pigs.
But they could have caught it from another human being if they had swine flu and perhaps didn't know.
They could have done, yes.
Yeah. And in terms of, we talk about a new strain, should we look at it as in the flu that you and I would get every winter? Hopefully not, but you know how it goes. And we're always told that the flu vaccination is updated every year because of the different makeup of the flu going around at that particular winter period. Is swine flu pretty much the same when we talk about new strains?
Well, it's not the same as the versions of flu that we're seeing circulating at the moment. What we do know, I think, because this person has not been taken terribly ill, it seems, is that I think we can conclude that the immunity in the population that keeps flu at bay for most years is sufficient to stop them being terribly ill.
So nothing to panic about?
I don't think there's anything to panic about.
Well, that is very good news. I will take that. Dr. Simon Clark, really good to see you. Thank you so much for coming in to talk to us about it on the UK Tonight. Still to come on the programme, the government has struck a pay deal with consultants in England that could bring an end to strike action. We'll bring you the latest on that. And the mayors of London and Greater Manchester criticised the government for excluding them from vital meetings at the start of the COVID pandemic. And why police have warned people not to eat chocolate bought at a Mansfield market over the weekend.
I used to play a lot of snooker back in the day, and I sort of fell out of love with it for a second, and I think it was about 8 years that I actually left my cue in the loft, and I went to the local pool hall just to watch some football, believe it or not, and then picked a cue up, and one of the guys said to me, do you fancy having a game? And I knocked a few in, and I progressed from there and went up to just playing in a normal little league, and then going for trials for county, then having a trial for England, which I wasn't very successful with, and then the next thing, COVID come along, and I was practicing, honing my skills, and then eventually going over to Wellingborough and trialling for the England Black Ball pool team, and successfully getting through.
Yeah, well, congratulations to you, because the luxury of your big win was not just that you could afford a nice pool table, but that you could give up your job as well because you were a tiler. So you didn't buy your way to this success. You had the luxury of time to put in the hours, right?
Oh, for sure. Well, as anybody knows with any sport, you've got to dedicate yourself. When you see yourself getting a little bit better and you sort of progress up through the ranks, you're beating players that you really shouldn't be beating. Then I think that's when you give yourself a little pat on the back and you go, do you know what? I can actually do this. So you progress through the ranks, and then what comes. You know, you can just reach for the stars if you like. I'm a totally grounded guy. You know, in Stoke-on-Trent, there's a fantastic standard of pool anyway, and you can't get above your station in this area because you've got your friends that'll just shoot you down. In other words, you know, you can't get above your station. You've just got to earn your respect, and that's all I've ever wanted out of pool, is just for somebody to say, do you know what, Neil Jones, he's a good player.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching the UK Tonight. Here's what's coming up. We're going to take you to a pub in Northern Ireland tonight to meet the team behind a £700 Christmas ad that's stolen John Lewis's thunder. And warnings about some of our Christmas food favourites due to one of the worst harvests on record. But first, two teenagers have gone on trial accused of murdering 16-year-old Brianna Jai. Brianna was found with fatal stab wounds in Warrington in February. The court hearing the two defendants exchanged messages about killing people they knew and compiled a list of targets. Our Chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam was at Manchester Crown Court today.
The prosecution say it was in February this year that a couple walking in a park in Warrington saw a male and a female bending over as if they were tending a dog. As that couple got closer, they realised it wasn't a dog, but in fact the bloodied body of a young person. That was, the prosecution say, Brianna Jai, a 16-year-old transgender girl who they say had been the victim of a sustained and violent assault, stabbed 28 times, and who was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, the prosecution say there's no dispute that the male and the female who were seen that day and ran away from the scene were the defendants in this case, a 16-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl who can't be named. There was no dispute, actually, that in the days and weeks leading up to that day, they discussed killing Brianna Jai, but both deny murder. The prosecution say both actually blame each other. Messages they'd exchanged, according to the prosecution, show a preoccupation with violence and torture and death and record their discussions about killing people that they knew. They encouraged each other to come up with ways to carry out those killings, and the prosecution say those messages show that they planned to kill Brianna in just the way that she was, in fact, killed. They had a list of 4 other children they intended to kill in addition to Brianna. And when one of those plans went wrong, they messaged each other to say, if we can't kill that child tomorrow, we can kill Brianna. The trial continues.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making news in the UK tonight. And the mayors of London, Liverpool and Greater Manchester all criticised the government's handling of the pandemic while giving evidence to the COVID inquiry today, saying they weren't kept informed at the beginning of the crisis. London Mayor Sadiq Khan claimed lives could have been saved if he'd been invited to Cobra meetings, and he told the inquiry he was kept in the dark. Meanwhile, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, criticised what he called the government's London-centric approach to COVID restrictions.
Our worry was that there was a London centricity in decision-making. I did not attend one meeting of Cobra right through the pandemic, and people need to ask whether a city region with 2.8 million people in it should never have the opportunity to say, well, this is how it looks from here. The only UK government body that I attended was the one of the nations, chaired by Michael Gove, when we had an issue with Scotland and a travel ban.
The producers of Britain's Got Talent have reached a settlement with David Walliams and apologised to him after private conversations he had while judging on the programme were leaked to a newspaper. Walliams left the show last year after apologising for disrespectful comments about contestants made during filming breaks in 2020. Those remarks emerged after a transcript was leaked to the Guardian newspaper. High Court documents released last month revealed that the comedian had accused producers Fremantle of causing him psychiatric harm and financial loss. Police have told people who bought chocolate from a Mansfield market stall not to eat it after reports of customers falling ill. Nottinghamshire police have issued a safety alert about the chocolate, which is wrapped in gold foil and from Mansfield Market. Officers have asked anyone who bought the chocolate to get in touch. This is after they received reports of a number of people feeling unwell. This year's Christmas dinners could be at risk because of a shortage of festive staples. Industry experts and farmers have been warning that storms and unprecedented rainfalls have led to one of the toughest harvests on record. Britain's latest potato crop is predicted to hit a record low, and shoppers can also expect empty shelves after harvests of broccoli and cauliflower were also badly affected. The government has struck a deal with consultants in England, which could bring an end to their strike action over pay. Members of the BMA and HCSA will now vote on that new deal. The government's dispute with junior doctors, however, has continues. Our political correspondent, Amanda Acas, has this report.
As the NHS braces for its busiest time of year, hopes that an injection of cash for consultants and a package of reform will bring an end to strikes by senior doctors. It's a big announcement for the new Health Secretary, just 2 weeks into the job.
This is a really good reform of a pay contract for consultants that has been around for some 20 years, that will mean that it is faster, simpler and fairer for consultants, but also critically for patients. And so I really hope that consultants feel able to accept this offer.
The consultants are already getting a 6% pay rise this year, but the new offer would see an extra 4.95% put into their overall pay pot from January. Under the new structure, some bands would be unaffected, but most receive a significant boost, with some getting over £13,000.
We've had huge pay cuts in real terms over the last 10, 15 years or so. And what this pay offer attempts to do is to try and redress that. It's going to include some reform to the pay review body, which has let us down over the last 10 or 15 years by allowing that pay erosion to happen.
Announcing a series of public sector pay deals this summer, Rishi Sunak insisted all offers were final and striking would make no difference. But with consultants walking out as well as junior doctors, NHS waiting lists have hit record levels, despite the Prime Minister's promise to bring them down. That's politically embarrassing, and now the government's really been forced into a softening of approach.
We can't take it anymore.
There's no deal yet for the junior doctors who've been striking since March, but with the combined walkouts leading to more than 1 million rescheduled appointments, patients largely welcome today's news.
They should feel valued, they should be well paid, as well as creating good working conditions.
They should be better remunerated. They work incredibly hard and they're brilliant people.
I think they get enough and they shouldn't be pushing for more. Maybe the nurses, yes, but certainly not the consultants, because they do a lot of private work anyway.
The Royal College of Nursing say they're appalled by the deal when their members have had the lowest pay rise in the public sector. The consultants' vote will be done by mid-January. If they reject the deal, further strikes could be on the cards. Amanda Acas, Sky News.
Still to come on the UK tonight, we'll hear from the British parents hoping that their wait for justice is finally over, 33 years on from their daughter's murder in France. And I'll speak to MP Clive Lewis and journalist Laura Trevelyan about their journey to discover their shared history on either side of the slave trade. Now, on the face of it, Labour MP Clive Lewis and journalist Laura Trevelyan don't really have that much in common. But with the help of historians, they have discovered that they share a troubling history. Clive's ancestors were slaves on the Caribbean island of Grenada, where Laura's ancestors were slave owners. And experts say members of Clive's family were probably owned by members of Laura's. Well, now they've produced a podcast to try to come to terms with their histories and start a conversation about how Britain can make amends for its past. Well, Laura joins me now, Laura Trevelyan. She is in New Jersey, and Clive Lewis is with me here in the studio tonight. Good evening to both of you. Laura, if I can, I'll come to you first. Talk to me about how this first started, because it began with your discovery of your ancestors' past.
Yeah, that's right, Sarah-Jane. So actually there was this whole database of the compensation that was paid, if you can imagine, to Britain's slave owners when slavery was abolished back in 1833. And that database of compensation was actually put online in about 2014. And then some of my relatives Googled that database, typed Trevelyan into it, and found out to their horror that Trevelyans had been part owners in at least 6, and we subsequently discovered actually 10 sugarcane plantations in Grenada. And that set me off on a voyage of discovery and linked me to Clive.
Well, Laura, you apologised for your family's part in the slave trade on the island of Grenada, and you paid compensation, reparations of around £100,000 to help communities on the island. Clive, at the very same time, you were standing up in the House of Commons saying, why hasn't there been a discussion of this? In fact, not just a discussion of it, you couldn't find any statement from a British MP addressing what had happened in the past between Britain and the slave trade abroad.
I think there had been some discussion in Parliament. Bernie Grant definitely raised the issue, and other black MPs had, but the actual issue of reparatory justice wasn't something that had been mentioned in the chamber for a long time. And I thought that if Laura could do it, Laura's family, the Trevelyan family, and subsequently the Gladstone family and others have done that, then why couldn't the British government have that conversation? Why couldn't we start to address some of those wrongs? And some people will say, well, the past is the past, but, you know, understanding the past helps us understand the present. And, you know, that's what we have history programmes on that talk to us about our past and try to explain where we are now and look to the future. And that's what this is about. It's about understanding our past. You know, we're a country that's just had Brexit. Some people would call that a kind of post-imperial tantrum of some kind. And one of the questions I think we need to ask ourselves as a country is, what kind of country do we want to be? And to do that, you need to understand your history in its full extent. And there are some people who don't want us to, who've got this kind of history, narrative of history, which I think is quite limited. And I think we can actually understand a great deal more about ourselves and our complexity if we go back and look at that.
Well, Laura, so, you know, taken with you, were you, by your family's past, that you actually gave it your job with the BBC to become a campaigner for reparations and to talk about this issue full-time. Explain to us how you and Clive discovered that your pasts were linked, because, you know, the island of Grenada, such a small island, it seemed obvious straight away that your family's paths will have crossed.
It's so interesting, Sarah-Jane. It's an island of about 120,000 people, and Trevelyan's owned basically, or part-owned, about 10 plantations. And a distinguished historian at the University of the West Indies, Sir Hilary Beckles, said, well, you know, Laura, that means in this day and age, basically almost everybody on the island of Grenada probably at some point had some connection or was owned in some way by your ancestors, which is pretty extraordinary. And so when Clive stood up in Parliament, it was like a light bulb going off in my head when he said, if a family can apologise and pay reparations for slavery, why can't Britain's government? And I know people might say it's the past, but, you know, Sarah-Jane, there are still pockets of illiteracy in Grenada to this day. And that's one of the legacies of slavery. The islands were left with absolutely nothing at emancipation and then became independent with very little. And you still have legacies of ill health, of poverty, and you also have now this horrendous challenge of climate change. And of course, that's going to be discussed later this week at the summit, the World Leaders Summit. But, you know, the Caribbean islands are suffering so much from climate change. So it seems obvious that Britain and the other former colonial powers should be helping the Caribbean to invest in climate resiliency. as a kind of moral responsibility.
Well, Clive, you've got together because you're now doing a podcast series to discuss this further. I mean, your family's paths crossed in the past. Now they're crossing again in the future to bring something good out of something so bad. Why is it such an uncomfortable thing for the British government, the monarchy as well, because the British government and the monarchy, two of the big players in the slave trade for Britain abroad, why is it so uncomfortable to apologise in the first instance? Acknowledgement is there, but why is it so hard to apologise and to offer reparations for some of the issues Laura's just raised there?
It's a really hot topic, and I think, I think for the British government, I think if they apologise, if you have an argument with a relation or a partner, when you apologise and it's the heartfelt apology, what you're actually saying is, what can I do to make this right? And that's an open-ended question, and I think that's what the British government fears. And I think when you look at the,
Do they fear it's an expensive?
I think so, and I think it's the fact that some people say, well, look, slavery's happened throughout history, but the reality is many of the corporations, the banks, the insurance industry, the City of London grew up because of ensuring and preparing the way for slavery and making sure that that could happen. So much of our infrastructure, our economic infrastructure, is built on slavery. And I think understanding where a big part of the wealth of this country comes from, which makes us the 6th biggest economy in the world, is because of that history. And it still has an impact today. The Caribbean is one of the most indebted parts of the world, and they owe a lot of that money to the banks and financial institutions of London and this country, as well as others. So I think understanding that, having that apology, opens the door to saying, well, we took 200 years of free labour, brutalised you, then left you with nothing. And you've had to pick yourself up, and now you're in debt, and you've got the climate crisis coming. Maybe there's a conversation we need to have as global Britain if we want to have relationships with these countries in the 21st century, which are good relations. And I think that's a big conversation for us to have. But I think it also begins to answer questions here about how we view the issues of race, how we view the issues of immigration. We had Windrush. We know that it's got a lot of work to be done. And I think this is part of that story of healing some of those wounds.
Well, it's such a fascinating and important discussion to be had. We've only just scratched the surface of it in our 6 or 7 minutes together. But Laura, just quickly, the podcast, where can people find it?
Oh, thanks so much. Heirs of Enslavement, you can find it wherever you get your podcast. And I would say that Clive's dad, who's a member of the Windrush generation, he's a star of the podcast, Sarah-Jane.
Oh, parents always steal the show, don't they, when you invite them onto TV or podcast already? Heirs of Enslavement, if you're looking for it. Clive, thank you very much. And Laura as well, thank you for talking to us on the UK Tonight.
Thanks so much, Sarah-Jane.
Now, the parents of Joanna Parish, a British woman murdered in France more than 30 years ago, are hoping that justice could finally be done, even though the man suspected of killing her has since died in prison. Tomorrow, the wife of the alleged killer will go on trial, accused of being complicit in Joanna's murder. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports.
Joanna Parish was just 20 years old, a university student working in the French town of Auxerre as part of her degree course. She was lively and friendly, and then she went missing. Her body later found in the river Yonne. She had been raped and murdered.
That was what we called the chocolate box picture, and she hated it.
Decades later, the sense of loss still haunts her parents.
At the age of 20, she was full of fun. She was very, very friendly to everybody, very kind to everybody. She just enjoyed life.
Well, more than anybody else I've known, really. Jo so much deserved a long and a happy and a fulfilled life, because, as I said, she worked hard. She so much deserved it.
Nobody has been convicted of Joanna's murder, but it's certain that this man killed her. Michel Fourneret, a serial killer, imprisoned 15 years ago. He later confessed to murdering Joanna, but died before he could be tried. But Fourneret didn't act alone. His wife, Monique Olivier, helped him kill again and again. She's already in prison, but will finally now be prosecuted for Joanna's death. For her parents, it's been a tortuous wait for any form of justice.
It's a long time. It's over 30 years. We've been wanting to happen, obviously, so we're glad it's taking place.
What is striking is that Monique Olivier, a wife and mother, repeatedly lured women and girls to their deaths.
It's just such a horrible, horrible thing. I can't imagine any mother would be able to live with themselves like that.
Joanna is buried here, in the village where she grew up, where her family still lives, her grave written in English and French. Hers is a story of justice denied and delayed, but finally it may be coming. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Gloucestershire.
Coming up on the UK Tonight, the £700 ad made by a pub in County Fermanagh that's gone viral thanks to its message about loneliness at Christmas. And in sport, we'll be debating which overhead kick was better, Wayne Rooney's back in 2011 or Garnacho's yesterday for Manchester United in their win over Everton.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
That's a good long count.
Coming up, we're going to show you the Christmas advert made by a pub in Northern Ireland that's giving John Lewis a run for its money this festive season. But first, Nick is here with the sport. And Nick, I only want to talk about one goal. On repeat, please. That stunning overhead kick against Everton from Garnacho's. It's already being touted as goal of the season.
Am I allowed to give the viewers the insight that you've just given me into how you saw this goal? went off to carry on cooking the dinner. Well, it's the one goal you saw.
It's the one goal I saw at the weekend. I was like, I don't need to see any more. That was sublime.
And it was sublime. I'm sure the cooking was as well. Let's show you what we're talking about in case this is all double Dutch to you. So this is Alejandro Garnacho, who's a kid that United signed Manchester United from Atletico Madrid. And that is the goal. It's 3 minutes in. And let's not forget, it is the England goalkeeper Jordan Pickford who plays for Everton, whom he beat. People talked about it being expertly placed. Well, you can't expertly place when you're going backwards and flying there. You just try and make a good contact, which was fantastic contact. And it completely blew the air out of Everton's bubble. Everton had been fired up by all their protests against what they feel are unfair punishments from the Premier League for
breaking financial rules, which they admit doing, and the atmosphere was, yeah, we're going to fight back, we're going to show the fight, and that just ended the game effectively.
Yeah, up until that. Well, I tell you what, the goal was worth delaying dinner for, and as soon as I saw it, it reminded me of a certain Wayne Rooney goal, and a lot of comparisons as to which one was better.
Yeah, 12 years ago, this was the Manchester derby, and if you believe that the context of the game is important, then that's got a shout as well, because a goal in the Manchester derby is really impressive. It was a really important goal. Remarkably similar, crossed from the same sort of area, and he took off in the same kind of way. Let me show you the two of them together. A little bit of technology has been at work here. Here you go. So that's Rooney on the left and Garnacho yesterday on the right. It's amazingly similar. And the suggestion is, quite widely held, that because Garnacho was effectively running backwards away from the goal and still managed that, then his takes the edge. But that's pretty good.
Yeah, we like that goal a lot.
Well, there is some Premier League action tonight as well, so let's bring you tonight's sports headline, shall we?
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Welcome to the Roast restaurant here in central London. We are lucky enough today to be joined by 3 elite athletes. Now they're going to be cooking a cultural dish all related to their heritage. It's going to be fun. Let's go see who they are. Right, we're very lucky. We found a gap in the training schedule of a great British Olympic athlete. Lavia Nilsson's joined us in the kitchen, cooking for us today. What have you got for us, Lavia?
So this is a traditional Sudanese dish. That's my mum's heritage. It's called mahshi in Arabic, but it's basically a stuffed vegetable dish. It's got rice, and we're doing a vegan version today with some brown lentils instead of mincemeat. So yeah, really excited about it. My sister and I, we learned from our mum, you know, the value of a home-cooked meal.
And you're sort of growing up in your household, you said your mum was Sudanese and Egyptian, and your dad was from Denmark, right? So quite a multicultural household.
Yeah, my mum, you know, she taught us to appreciate food from every culture, mainly Sudanese food. We never sat in front of the television. We always sat on a dining table, always talking about school and sport and everything like that. So. And the good thing about my heritage is that the Sudanese diet is kind of influenced by both African and sort of Mediterranean diet. And we all know Mediterranean diet is really good for you. So I always say, like, herbs can add a lot of flavour to your dish. So we're actually going to use lentils for this dish, which makes it completely vegan, which is great. We're also going to add our herbs at the same time. Get the flavour in there.
Get that.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Let's have a look at the weather now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, it's going to be cold all week. Overnight frost, fog and a risk of snow and ice. Northern and western parts looking mostly fine this evening, although there will be a few coastal showers. Many eastern parts showery with sleet and snow on northern hills. Showers over eastern parts will extend further inland for a time tonight. Largely drying up later, while northern Scotland will see wintry showers spreading in.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, we always like to leave you with something weird or wonderful from around the UK, and this definitely falls into the wonderful category. A pub in Northern Ireland has gone viral after making a Christmas advert to highlight the issue of loneliness. Charlie's Bar in Enniskillen spent just £700 to make this advert, and it's getting the kind of attention for which John Lewis pays millions. Katie Spencer reports.
God knows what is hiding in those weak and drunken hearts.
It is the 2-minute amateur Christmas ad paid for by a Northern Ireland pub that's had social media users in floods. Sweet elderly widower with nobody to talk to, tick. A song that tugs at the heartstrings, tick. And an uplifting payoff, big tick. Amateur actor Martin McManus currently experiencing what it's like to go viral.
It feels pretty good, pretty good. It's going to be hard to come back down. That's the problem. I'm just enjoying it. I enjoy drama. I've been at it for years and years, and It's great to get success like this. It's unbelievable, actually, the way it has snowballed, you know.
Pub manager Una Burns had the ambitious idea, finding £700 for the shoot.
Never in our wildest dreams did we expect this reaction. It's just what I've seen in the pub over the years, and I suppose I really wanted to get across that message that it's not always a joyful, happy time for everybody, and that some people find it really tough, and just to be kind, and maybe a smile or a simple hello will go a long way.
We're not crying, you are, was the response from John Lewis on TikTok. And there might well be tears, seen by many as the masters of the Christmas ad. While the retailer hasn't said what it cost making its festive Venus flytrap this year, in the past it's thought to have spent around £1 million on its Yuletide commercials.
It's great.
Chief Creative Officer at Adam and Eve, Richard Brim, helped make adverts for John Lewis for 14 years.
It starts from telling an emotional story around Christmas and trying to get people to get them in the fields. There's a proven data to show if you sell the notion of Christmas and how people feel and happiness and togetherness and joy, it doesn't necessarily have to be the product of the year.
The viral response to one pub's festive foray into advertising, perhaps proving that during a cost of living crisis, retailers can stuff their big budgets as well as our turkeys. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
And just a bit more good news to leave you with tonight. This is coming from the IDF. Accompanied by IDF forces, 11 released hostages are now in Israeli territory. So that's 11 Israeli hostages now back in Israel tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night at 8.